Space Marine was a third-person action game released in 2011 for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 and PC, and is considered to be one of the best video game representations of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, with generally only the Dawn of War series getting higher praise from fans. Now, for those of you who haven't yet played the game, and if you haven't, you really should, you can get it dirt cheap these days, the story focuses on Captain Titus, one of the few Ultramarines who isn't written like a Mary Sue and is an utter badass, along with Sidonus and Leandros, are sent to help a planetary defense force of a forge world known as Graia to repel an Orc invasion. However, upon landing on the world, they discover a servo skull belonging to Inquisitor Drogon, requesting aid and talking about his super weapon, the Psychic Scourge, which is said could wipe out all Xenos life on the planet. However, when Titus and co activate the Scourge, it opens a warp rift which allows the Chaos forces of the sorcerer Nemeroth to invade the world, thanks to Inquisitor Drogon being dead and his corpse turned into a sleeper agent for the Chaos forces. As the Ultramarines escape thanks to the timely intervention of the Orc war boss Grimskull attacking Nemeroth, Titus and the others escape. Titus uses the warp-tainted power source to fully power up one of the Titans on the world and destroys the orbital spire, where the warp storm allowing the Chaos forces to enter is located. A reinforcement fleet arrives, consisting of everyone's favourite chapter, the Blood Ravens, as well as the Ultramarines' second company and large numbers of Imperial Guard. Titus leads them on an attack through the remaining Chaos forces to stop Nemeroth from performing a ritual to ascend to the status of Demon Prince, using the power of the device. Nemeroth had partially ascended to demonhood when Titus finally faces him in combat. Both are knocked off the spire in the struggle, and the captain defeats him in single combat while falling towards the ground. He then breaks the experimental device in half with his hands, and Titus survives the exposure to the raw warp energy, and is rescued by a Thunderhawk dropship before he can impact the ground. The end scene of the game involves a new Imperial Inquisitor by the name of Thrax, accompanied by Leandros and escorted by several Black Templar Marines who place Titus under arrest. Leandros believes that his captain had been corrupted by Chaos, based on his resistance to the warp forces. Titus denies the accusations of heresy and is backed up in this by Lieutenant Mira of the Imperial Guard, who also protests at the accusation. Titus, however, is willing to find the cause of his own mysterious resistance to Chaos, and voluntarily goes with the Black Templars on a condition that the Inquisition leaves the world and everyone else on it alone. The game was originally scheduled to have a pair of sequels made, which would have expanded Titus' character and continue immediately on from the cliffhanger at the end of the first game. The game's director, Raphael von Lierop, said in an interview with Penny Arcade, the second part of his story was to focus on a Titus Unleashed plot. Basically, there were forces arrayed against him that would have seen his loyalty to the Adeptus Astartes pushed to its limit, and his reaction would be to kind of go rogue, and we'd see a different Titus, not quite as in control as we saw him in Space Marine. He would be kicked out, as a consequence, exiled, which would basically be a death sentence for him. From that second game, Titus would grow to become an even more powerful and experienced Ultramarine, turning further and further from the strict teachings of the Codex Astartes. In the third game, Titus would return after being exiled as the chapter master of a whole new chapter of Astartes. He would survive and come back even stronger in the third game, where other Space Marines still loyal to him would rally around him, and he'd return to clean house, but as the head of a brand new chapter that we would build around him. However, it's unclear if this would be another chapter made up by the game studio itself, and by building up, mean recruiting members for it, or if the game would allow the player the opportunity to create their own chapter, just as with the tabletop game, a decision which admittedly would have made a lot of fans happy. Sadly, none of this would ever come to fruition, thanks to Studio THQ going bankrupt. Sadly, THQ was already starting to fall apart by then, and it became clear that Space Marine 2 wasn't going to happen. I was pretty heartbroken about that, but that's the way the business works. In the end, I'm glad things turned out the way they did, because I think if the end hadn't been so hard, I might not have had sought out a better way, and Hinterland may not have ever happened. So does this mean that Space Marine 2 and 3 will never happen? Not necessarily. For the longest time, fans believed Dawn of War 2 would never get a sequel. Then earlier this year in 2016, Dawn of War 3 was announced, the license having been picked up by Sega, much to the surprise and delight of the fans. So there's always the, admittedly slim chance, that a major studio could acquire the rights to make a sequel to Space Marine. Regardless, Space Marine is still one of the best Warhammer 40,000 video games ever made, so if you haven't played it yet, go on and do so. You won't regret it. Thanks for watching.